Hello, team. Welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. This is Ukraine War Kursk update for the 13th, late on the 13th of August 2024, at least in the time zone I am in. In fact, by the time I finish this video, it'll probably be the 14th here anyway. So, first of all, this is very dynamic. The whole front there is dynamic. Second, it doesn't mean that everything's going if it's going well for Ukraine in Kursk, it doesn't mean it's going well for Ukraine everywhere. Of course, there are challenges on the eastern front line as well. It's just that this is the most newsworthy front for Ukraine. I'm going to start with the US declaring that they were given no formal heads up about the high risk. Well, not they've declared this. This is out in the New York Times that they were not giving any heads up about the high risk Kursk mission, possibly because Ukrainian officials feared the Americans would try to persuade Ukraine to call it off. That is, as mentioned, New York Times. Ukraine was also using American supplied weapons, arms, and munitions, despite Biden's caution in May that Ukraine could only use American made weapons inside Russia for limited self defense strikes. So, yep, there is that. But on the other hand, Ukraine's Kursk Oblast incursion has created a real dilemma for Putin, says Biden himself. Quote, it's creating a real dilemma for Putin, and we've been in direct contact, constant contact with the Ukrainians. There's a claim that actually Biden has spent 4 to 5 hours a day speaking to the Ukrainians about this offensive. So this is a big thing for both sides. US might not have been given a heads up, but they are potentially involved now in, well, at least discussing the whole event. Now, Belarus is apparently to transfer military equipment to Russia amid Ukraine's operation in Kursk Oblast. The recent delivery of Belarusian military equipment is related to a, quote, urgent request from the Russian side, end quote, due to losses and a lack of equipment in the Kursk Oblast and other areas, Bell Novosti said, citing an undisclosed source in the country's defense ministry. Right. One of the things that has been discussed an awful lot is whether this is actually an objective, that being to move troops from the eastern front lines across to Kursk in order for the Russians to defend Kursk properly. This appears to be one of the objectives, and there have been various claims concerning whether this is actually happening, with initially some Ukrainians saying no, it's not happening, then admitting that it was happening, and the Russians, certain Russian sources admitting that this was happening. And now there are still there is a slight variation on the claims here. So this is a Politico article saying Putin pulls units out of Ukraine to defend Russia, Kiev says. So Ukrainian special military operation is giving the Kremlin a migraine. Okay, so they are pulling units from other areas of the front line. We've heard Kharkiv, we've heard Kherson, we've heard a number of different places. And indeed, we've now heard that Russia is transferring troops to the Kursk region from Kaliningrad, the exclave on the Baltic Sea. So, Lithuanian Defense Minister Larinas Kasčiūnas has said. Dmytro Lukova, the spokesman for the Tavria Armed Forces, said that Putin is withdrawing units from Zaporizhia and Kherson region to protect Kursk. Meanwhile, Lukashenko gave instructions, the Belarusian dictator, to transfer some military equipment from combat units to the armed forces of the Russian Federation. This is due to the urgent request from the Russian side in connection with the losses and lack of equipment, both in the Kursk region and other directions. So that is indicating that the Russians are in a dire situation and they need troops from wherever they can get them. However, Kiev Independent says the Kursk incursion has not yet influenced the situation near Toretsk, according to the Ukrainian military. Russian forces continue attacking Toretsk, and battles have now reached the outskirts of the town, according to Alexander Bordian, the military spokesperson there. So that is probably the one place that the Ukrainians would want the Russians to draw troops from. But on the flip side, that's going to be the one place that the Russians would not want to draw troops from, because that is where they're having the most success. In other words, if you're the Russian commander looking at wherever you can draw your forces from, that will be your last choice. So it's no surprise that the Russians are drawing troops from Kaliningrad, are drawing troops from Kherson and Kharkiv. And this will be Turetsk will be the last place they get those troops from. Although there are some who have claimed that the, the Donbass has provided some Russian troops for Kursk. Anyway, Ukraine controls an area, says top lead, in the Kursk region that is slightly larger than Kiev or comparable to 25 areas of Bakhmut, about 1,000 square kilometers. Russia has lost at least 54 units of equipment. Ukraine captured about 1,000 prisoners of war. Okay, so some of these figures you might call into question. The number of units, according to Nalcio, has been about 22, but this is a claim of 54, so we'll see. 1,000 prisoners in war is probably the upper end of the scale. Zelensky said hundreds. I think it is at least, mid hundreds. I've seen so many videos, more out today, another at least three dozen in one video. I mean, goodness me, it's just a lot of troops that the Russians are losing to POWs. We can debate, how much territory is controlled by the Ukrainians at the moment. If you go to Andrew Perpetua's map, and this is 7 hours um, out of date, if you like, or updated 7 hours ago, it's dynamic. Things are changing all the time, and this is only going to be on visually confirmed open source data, so it will be very conservative anyway. We can see that the area is quite significant. So if we go from the most extreme ends, that's 64 kilometers in that direction from one side to the other, but it's a bit obviously a lot longer over there. But otherwise, in general, it's probably 40 odd kilometers in width, and from the border, probably about 30 kilometers in depth, depending on where you go from. I mean, if you go from there to there, or maybe there to there, it's, another, well, okay, 30, but you get the point. Depends where you take it from. Anyway, that is that's Andrew Perpetua's map, and I think that's yeah, probably a good place to get a bit of an idea of what's going on. Right. Okay. Moving on to where were we? Here. So the Russian forces, says OSINT Technical, are rapidly digging a network of trenches in Kursk Oblast with only one catch. The trenches are 45 kilometers behind the border. Russian forces have been developing a trench network that, if fallen back to, would cede Ukraine a massive amount of territory. Yeah, that you could say the same for the Ukrainians around Pokrovsk, of course. But yeah, there are some satellite images that are coming out showing that the Russians are indeed building trenches, and where they are building those trenches, you can go and check out OSINT Technical's thread if you so desire. Then we have Suret Maps, the pro-Russian mapper mapping on Kursk. So this is probably some hours out now. This is 5:37. Yeah, so a good 6 hours out now. But anyway, situation in Kursk front, says this source. The Ukrainian army regained the initiative of the Koronova axis by means of a pincer maneuver. From the north, it captured the localities of Olgovka and Matvivka, arriving at the east of Koronovo. So that is this town over here. Show Koronovo on the larger map. So Koronovo is this area there. So it is. It appears to be an objective for the Ukrainians. It's somewhere that has been mentioned a number of times. Whether they're going to directly attack it or not, I guess we'll see. This is the place that Suret Maps is mentioning now. They were stopped by Russian troops there. Meanwhile, to the south, the Ukrainian forces seized again part of Snagost and moved to the north and northwest of the locality, reaching the locality of Krasnobayorsk, Yabrosk, anyway, that place, which remains contested. On the other hand, the Ukrainian forces continue to penetrate the Russian positions, reaching the locality of Kalchuk. The area remains in a grey zone, where sporadic fighting is taking place. Still, the Russian army was able to retake some positions in Malaya Lokhnia and Nikolaevka. As for the southeast of Sudzha, the Ukrainian forces took full control over Plakovo. On the other hand, the situation in the area has become clearer. Russian forces re entered many of the previously evacuated localities such as Ozerki, Belaya, and Giri. So, okay, the claim is that the Russians are counterattacking in a number of places, stopped the Ukrainians on the outskirts of Koronovo, counterattacking around Malaya Lokhny, although other sources like Nor report saying actually around here is where the Ukrainians are doing well. So, take that maybe with a pinch of salt. And the mention of Giri, well, actually, this is kind of over in this direction here, where the Ukrainians appear to be doing fairly well and making some good distance, although it's all grey zone according to Andrew Perpetua, but that's talking about Ozerki there. And on the way to there's Giri just there. That's where, as you can see, there are a number of destroyed Ukrainian vehicles, but yeah, that's where the Ukrainians are certainly pushing. So we'll see how that develops over time. Anyway, that's Syriac Maps is a pro-Russian appraisal of what's going on, and if there's an awful lot of blue here and blue arrows and control gained by the Ukrainians, that's coming from Syriac Maps. You can generally assume that's going to be a conservative estimate of what's going on for the Ukrainians. Then we have, please do check out Noel Reports. He has a daily thread of everything that's going on. I talked about the Chechen TikTok battalion Akhmat previously in my last video. Alaudanov, the commander there, claimed that the situation near Kursk is under control and that no Kadyrov fighters have been captured, dismissing videos of prisoners as fake. In response, Ukraine's 225th Air Assault Brigade published photos showing a large number of documents belonging to captured Chechen fighters. So he then came out and spoke against his previous claim there. I don't know if that's. Yeah. I don't know if he's got it there, but there is another claim of him then coming out saying, "Oh yeah, no, actually, we have had some prisoners taken, but they're the Akhmat Battalion, not the Special Forces." Anyway, military military reports indicate that there are now some prisoners from the Kursk region who have agreed to fight with the Russian Volunteer Corps and the Freedom of Russia Legion. There aren't many of them, and they will undergo initial checks, of course. Lots of talk about fighting over this position, which is Kamishnoye. That is all the way over here on the way to somewhere around here. Anyway, that's moving over to the east there, Belitsia, and around here. So I can't quite find that on the map, but it's one of these areas, I'm sure. Anyway, going back to no reports. Here we go. Yeah, over there past Borky. So, although not yet visually confirmed, it looks pretty certain the Ukrainians have managed to securely bypass all controls Borky and Spalnoya while fighting is happening in and near Krupets, which these places I'm fairly sure. In fact, I'll have to go and find these for you. Yes, here they all are. So in this salient that you can see, it's all marked as a grey zone by Andrew Perpetua. The places talked about here are Borky, Spalnoya, and Krupets. Going on to this place, Kamshnoya, something like that. Anyway, those are the areas talked about in No Reports' tweet just then. We'll go back to No Reports, just see a few other bits and pieces. As I said earlier, unbelievable how much footage is being released of Russian captives. So they definitely have lost an awful lot of troops to the Ukrainians for that exchange fund. Biden's refused to publicly comment on Ukrainian armed forces attack on the Kursk regions, not in any sort of official detail. More captives taken, so on and so forth. More captives taken. Incredible. Anyway, so we'll get on to a few mapping updates here from no report. So activity around Koronova, as mentioned, that's that place to the west here. So that's up there. We'll dip back into no report, see what is being said about that. Oops. Here we go. So the Ukrainians have increased its area of control in two places: the fields west of Maloloknia, so that's this kind of area, um, and also near Koronovo. Geolocated footage makes us confidently believe that Ukrainians have increased presence with attacks or deep reconnaissance groups happening near uh, a number of other places around. That's further up north there. So if we go back to the large map, that is going on up to here. So that's this kind of area where they're doing deep reconnaissance group attacks and have some presence there. So, good news for the Ukrainians there. At Koronova, there are two areas of attention: the eastern outskirts. Geolocated footage confirms a Ukrainian presence there, as well as the northern part of the ponds of Durovka Vetreno, which is also assaulted by the Ukrainian forces. One thing is for sure: Ukrainians are close to Koronova, if not already inside. So you've got some ponds there around it. So we go into Andrew Perpetua's map. There are some ponds around here. I can't really see it with the color overlay, but yes, the Ukrainians are certainly threatening Koronova quite considerably. And then we have another map in the Sudja area, which is this part around here that they had taken or not quite fully taken. Different claims concerning Sudja. And we're going to talk about Sudja in a second with regard to how important it is the for its railway network around there. But anyway, Suj is there. This is where the Russians have been counterattacking, as according to Andrew Perpetua and others. So we can confidently confirm a number of these places are under control. Melovoy, Zamoste, Dmitriokov, and Plekovo have come under the control of the Ukrainians there. So can we place any of these on the map? Let's have a quick look. Um, yeah, so a couple of those places are here. That's Plakovo, that's Melovoy. So in Andrew Perpetua's uh, control zone for the Ukrainians there. Um, okay, now wheels. What else do we need to say? New reports of fighting east of Plakovo have come in. So that's over here. We think that Borky might already be under Ukrainian control as fighting occurs near Kamishnoye. Needs confirmation. That's what I talked about earlier with you. And yeah, I think that's enough on the kind of mapping front for now. You can see that they are extending they're seeking to extend control here, going to the east, but also north and northwest too. So anyway, now on to a couple of other bits and pieces. So here it appears that, and I think this is, yeah, Kadyrov's Akhmat unit has been taken out, command post has been taken out in Kursk Oblast. So this is possibly a very good high 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 value target that's been successfully obliterated. The guys waited until Kadyrov's officers gathered in one barn, according to the Euromaidan press, and leveled it with an accurate shot. Um, said the caption to the video. So yeah, that is well and truly flattened that building there. Whether it contained those people, who knows? But that's a claim from the Ukrainians. The Kursk offensive situation update from Emil Kastelhemi, as I've done often, giving his views on what's going on. The operation continues. Ukrainians have expanded their area of control, pushing north towards Lugov and east towards Belitsia. We had to modify some map visualization styles to better represent the situation. Okay, so you can start seeing that some of these fortifications built in. I think possibly, uh, yeah, Russian defenses there. Okay, so what does he have to say? Part of the Ukrainian focus, seems to have shifted to the southeastern part of the operation in the Belitsia direction. Ukrainians have likely entered several villages between Belitsia and the state border. There are some uncertainties. There's very little material from here. Ukrainian APC detachment managed to get as far as the village of Giri next to Belitsia. However, they suffered significant losses and likely had to retreat. Belitsia and the immediate surroundings are most likely still under Russian control. The town of Sudzha is likely mostly, if not completely, under Ukrainian control. In Koronovo and nearby villages, the Russians are still actively defending. Ukrainians are close, but there's no indication they would have entered the town with a larger force. Ukrainian groups are also maneuvering on the northern side of the operational area. It's unclear how deep they are able to penetrate, but the Russians don't seem to have a very solid defense line there yet. Still, Lugov is a very long way to go if Ukraine wants to capture it. Okay, Ukraine holds the initiative. There's still the possibility Ukraine opens up a new direction to support the current effort. There have been various attacks over the border in several places in Kursk and Belgorod Oblast, but nothing very major yet. Even though Ukraine has made tactical progress in many places, the general situation in Kursk hasn't changed very much in the recent days. Battles are still being fought in the area of the tactically important towns of Sudzha and Koronevo. While the Russians don't seem to be very organized yet, they have been able to somewhat control the situation. Ukraine should have the ability to gain more ground, especially if it's ready to tolerate heavier risks and commit more troops to the fight. So, yeah, we will see more losses if the Ukrainians are riskier and seek to take more and more land. So, I'm fairly sure that they'll be doing that certainly for the next day or two. Now, I mentioned Sudzha and how it could be important. Intel Schizo here says Ukrainian intelligence hit a gold mine on Russian logistics in near real time. The capture of Sudzha may not seem grand on a map, but the capture of the railway station may allow Ukrainian intelligence direct access to Russian railway computer systems, schedules, train consists, and internal Russian railway communications from dispatch to defect detectors. Sudzha station, besides being part of the Lvov-Belgorod line, that I previously highlighted is part of the Moscow Railway Division, which must be causing panic in Russian high command, knowing that the enemy has a real time capability to view your logistical movements. Nice part is that you can't really shut this thing off. A lot of those defect detectors and the signal sensors are automated. The only way you're shutting it off is if you go out there and rip the whole system apart, which they're not going to do because they're insanely expensive and creates insane risk and safety issues for both passenger and freight rail, and would leave trains out on the track completely blind as to what's in front of them, so you can't really shut it off. Also, a lot of these systems transmit via radio automatically. They are tripped when a train goes by. So even if they've lost access to the computer, they would know how. They would now have the frequencies needed to listen into on those sensors and detectors, which again you physically can't turn off unless you go out there and rip them apart, which they're not going to do. The systems are designed so that the train out in the middle of nowhere has an ability to know if they are safe and to know what's in front of them and what's behind them. Can't shut it off. So, yeah, then to get an idea of a dispatch center, here's a short video. I'm not going to watch that. It doesn't explain much. It just shows it. Now, dispatch center is different from a train station such as Sucha, but you can get an idea. A lot of this is going to be physically showing a dispatcher. All of the radio information is being transmitted by all of these defect detectors and the signal sensors you can't turn off, can't fire. Uh, turn it off, can't fire. This is incorrect English here. But even if the Russians drop a bomb on the train station, Ukrainians are already likely to have hauled away all the important information, such as train maps, timetables, all the physical documents, frequencies, and can do with the old-fashioned way if necessary. Listen to the radio and stare at a map with a pen and paper. There are more modern train dispatch centers that are more digitalized, but a lot of rail infrastructure is still living with pretty antiquated technologies. Not necessarily a bad thing in this day and age, but it just really showcases how there's nothing to shut off, really. It's also not just a train station. Sudzha is the administrative capital of the Shyzhansky Rayon, so the amount of juicy intelligence sitting at the administrative buildings in this town is one giant intelligence cash cow. And Ukraine was able to seize with minimal casualties, minimal damage, and more importantly, was able to seize before Russian forces were able to destroy the documents and other useful intelligence in Sudzha. Um, so yeah, this is um, obviously going to be super important for the Ukrainians there if they can take advantage of the intelligence that they can gather of the Russian rail network. Now, what that means, what they do with that, I don't know. Might help partisan activity, might help striking. I don't know whether they'll be striking rail logistics. If yeah, who knows? But potential uh, gain for the Ukrainians in terms of intelligence there. Right. Dara Masako, who is senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, Russia and Eurasia program. She focuses on defense issues in Russia, has a bit of an analysis. So let's go into that. Russia begins its response to Ukraine's incursion into Kursk. Multiple ministries are involved and the command structure is still forming. Some of Ukraine knew what they were doing and exploited a weak seam in Russian command and control. A few important issues to watch. Russia has declared its defense operation to be a counter-terrorist operation, KTO in Russian. This is a domestic operation, and the FSB and Rosgvardia have roles along with the military. This is what the war in Chechnya was called from 1999 until it ended. Putin has instructed the FSB and its border troops and Rosgvardia to defend the borders and assist this operation. He also told the military today that their main task is driving out Ukrainian forces from Russian territory and countering Ukrainian recon and sabotage groups. Who is responsible for what in Kursk? FSB border troops and Rosgvardia have responsibility for the border and ensuring its defense. For the military, Kursk is located in Moscow military district, but the troops forward deployed IVO Ukraine belong to the Leningrad military district. The entirety of the area was formerly the Western military district from 2010 to 2024. Russia decided to split it up in March to April 2024 to cope with NATO expansion. It named two commanders, Lapin, who's the guy that's in charge of attacking down into Kharkiv Oblast, and he's not got a particularly good track record, and Kozovlev. So that's the Leningrad and the is it the Moscow military district, respectively. So the operational group of forces north received a name change and upgrade about 1 to 2 weeks before it attacked Kharkiv in May. Prior to May, it was the Territorial Defense Group. So for the past 3 months, it's been transitioning from a defensive to an offensive orientation, meaning that the Russian op group was much weaker than the others. From May to August, it had a major reorganization, a new commander, and attacked Kharkiv early. Its MOD units are now bogged down in Kharkiv, and the offensive is not making progress. Someone in Ukraine knew where to press. The airview attacked a weak spot, Kursk, of the weakest op group. A C2 command and controlled scramble between FSB border guards, Akhmat fighters, and any MOD forces that could rally ensued in week one. Russia has experience in creating a combined command and control structure that involves internal security agencies and the military from its experience in the Second Chechen War. In the 90s, a joint command was established in what was then the North Caucasus MDHQ, Military District HQ. I raise this because Bortnikov, so he's the FSB guy who's been put in charge of the Kharkiv operation for the Russians, Bortnikov and Gerasimov worked with this specific command and control arrangement in Chechnya. While today's situation is much different, they remember how to work together. Implementation is a different matter, of course, but I note the experience. I haven't seen a KTO headquarters established yet. Who could lead it? All military district commanders are dual-hatted as operational group commanders, and their forces are engaged. MOD options could be Lapin, the guy in Kharkiv, Kozovlev, Nikiforov, don't know him, and Gerasimov, obviously the commander in chief. It's Lapin's AOR, but Op Group North is weak. The territory is Moscow military district, but Kozovlev and many of his forces are in eastern Ukraine. Nikiforov is ground forces commander and former Op Group commander. His name is circulating online. Gerasimov has also given the stakes. Rosgvardia's task will be to set up cordons, roadblocks, and other barriers. FSB border guards in the area have been taken prisoner already, to include conscripts, a very politically sensitive issue for Putin. FSB assets will be doing recon and trying to sweep up AFU teams and interrogation. Russian forces are already taking small numbers of AFU teams as prisoner. Here I worry about what comes next because the FSB use horrible torture methods. Russia's Ministry of Emergency Situations is now engaging with evacuations of towns. Russia is showing videos of some armor moving, and eventually, I would anticipate more helicopter and Air Force assets. They will probably use artillery, especially if the towns are emptied. The AFU operation has successfully exploited seams of Russian of responsibility between the FSB, Rosgvardia, and MOD. I suspect targeted leaks will emerge between MOD and GRU and FSB over who is responsible for intel and defense failures. AFU invaded Russia despite 2 years of partial mobilization in Kursk, 10 years of legislation to make power ministries coordinate better, and a 2023 offer from Prigozhin to help guard the border. Shoigu rejected it. Bardak, as usual. And now the reaction begins. This war has left Russia's borders weak, the army engaged in Ukraine and not immediately available to defend border regions, and FSB border troops not supported. The Russian system's instinct will be to overcorrect and swing harshly at Kursk. Okay, so that's interesting that there could have been just an awful lot more thought going into this attack into Kursk than we have realized. Now, War Translated Dmitry says Vyostka reports that Russian conscripts evacuated from the border to the Kursk region are forced to sign contracts to be sent back to the front line. By law, conscripts in Russia are not supposed to take part in combat. Reportedly, 150 conscripts are now in one of the military units in the Kursk region. They are told, quote, to follow the assault infantry to clean the territory and are promised benefits and combat payments, $50 per day. Sort of thing that you'd expect if things were a little bit desperate. Well, then there's this as well. Russia has no men left, says PS01. Several hundred refuseniks from St. Petersburg were forcibly put on a plane and taken to Kursk, he says. The soldiers have already been given machine guns and are going to be sent into battle. The day before, at least 500 people were taken out of the military settlement of Kamenka near St. Petersburg, where the 138th Separate Motorized Rifle Brigade is based, and where several hundred men had refused to fight were held, according to Astra Media. So, if true, I mean, all of this paints a picture of a bit of chaos for the Russians, that they are having to react to a very difficult situation that the Ukrainians have brought on the Russians. That could include some seriously useful intel or strategic objectives obtained. And all the while, there's this confusion between who's supposed to be operating in the area. You've had Gerasimov moved aside, and the FSB chap moved in to control the Kursk defense, and claims that there are troops being drawn from other places along the front line and even from Kaliningrad over here in order to supply Kursk with defensive capabilities. But it takes time to mobilize troops, to move troops and to get them into position and get them there with the requisite equipment. And each hour that the Russians are struggling to do so, the Ukrainians are going to be making hay while that sun shines. So it's still looking good for the Ukrainians. The question is obviously what they're going to do when they take this land. When they grind to a halt, when they culminate. We've talked about the different options. Will they dig in where they're at? Will they retreat to more advantageous lines, or will they pull completely out of Russia and say, it becomes a kind of PR win, but they are looking after their own forces because they don't want to retreat those forces, and then you could put those troops they're using up here, who will have had some good experience there, who already are supposedly experienced troops, and bring them to bear in places in the east where they're needed. So yeah, all those options still on the table. Ukraine is still making those gains. It's looking good for Ukraine, but they are taking losses, of course, and that will be reflected in those loss lists that we look through every day. And being on the attack, the Ukrainians are likely to take more material losses than the Russians. Anyway, that's enough from me. Hopefully that was of use to you. Take care, guys, and speak soon.